Greetings, theists and non-theists. I am the Atheist Paladin. I'm going to respond to dfpolis' last video, his video that he directed towards me. I'm sorry for the long turnaround, but there's lots of things I had to do. But the long story short, I'm going to show here that he is not arguing in good faith, that he is not only getting my position wrong, that he's intentionally and willfully, knowing that he's not getting my position right, and therefore any of his response is invalid. And this is usually a rare occasion. Most of the time, I grant people I grant a reasonable doubt to them, but in many cases, I've already spelled out what my position is, and what how I respond to his position, but he still gets it wrong. And so I have to say that he no longer is arguing in good faith. He's just making the straw man because it's what's convenient to him.
I commented, the first problem is in your definition of naturalism. Physics holds order is lost in thermodynamic processes. Likewise, theists hold causality. Ex nihilo nihil fit. From nothing comes nothing. No being does more than it has the capacity to do, so it is unclear how that is a difference, let alone a decisive one. Calvinists hold predestination/determinism. Many quantum physicists do not. Again, no decisive difference. As a theist physicist, I am committed to mathematical laws. How have you set naturalism apart from theism?
Well, I never said that my definition is complete. I hinted that it is just basically a good general rule of thumb. It is a good place to begin the discussion. So you really haven't showed that my definition is bad. The fact of the matter is that the example that you give meets all three criteria that I give. I even say that energy is conserved. That is a law of thermodynamics. So you're going to say my definition of naturalism is bad because of the laws of the example of laws of thermodynamics, even though one of the things I say is that energy is conserved, which is a law of thermodynamics. So the irony of your statement is not lost on me. Okay, that's not my job. That's the whole point of the challenge. It's not I am setting apart. I want you to set it apart.
Here we come to a fundamental difference in our worldviews. His worldview is one which is disintegrating. He wants to set the natural world apart from the divine world. I want to integrate them. Open philosophy is about having an integral worldview which is open to all of the data of human experience, both scientific data and our spiritual insights. So my job is not to confirm his worldview that there is a separation, but to show that he is wrong and that what he calls naturalism is perfectly consistent with theism. And further, what he calls the supernatural is part of the lived world. So what I am trying to do here is quite different from what he expects me to do. He expects me to confirm his prejudice that there are lines of separation, separating our human experience into incompatible compartments, whereas what I am in fact trying to do is to show the compatibility of the natural and supernatural orders.
You know what? That's fine. I don't disparage you for doing that. But if you want to do that to show that the supernatural and the natural are really two sides of the same coin, have at it, Haas, right? So, but if you're going to make it want to seem like that this is my sort of ignorant misunderstanding, oh, you have stepped in it. It's been a long field of philosophy that has been discussed by many philosophers, Socrates, Philo. There have been plenty that talk about this disintegrating or whatever, that the supernatural and the natural are two distinct things and are two different categories of things and therefore cannot be known by the same means. But if you want to demonstrate that they can be known by the same means, have at it. Go ahead. But that's not really a relevant point that refutes anything that I have so far done. The theists hold to causality, in the sense that you'll explain later that A is before B, but it's not really causality if it has no explanatory power.
Another problem with Atheist Paladin's statement is his coupling of explanation and predictability. When we're asked how the Civil War came to be, we can cite a number of factors: slavery, states' rights, economics, and so on. While this is a completely acceptable explanation, it lacks predictive value. On the other hand, modes of explanation which have predictive value are rejected by naturalists. Teleology, the idea that actions are directed toward ends, has a great deal of predictive value. No one has a computer model which tells us how a spider is going to respond mechanically to a fly landing on his web. But if we understand the purpose of webs, which is to trap food for spiders to eat, then we have no difficulty in predicting how a spider will respond to a fly being trapped on his web. Yet this mode of explanation, which has a great deal of predictive value, is rejected by naturalists because of their own prejudices.
Now you're only trying to confuse the issue, but by bringing in a matter of historical or forensic sort of science, there's a difference. If you're going to propose that God did it, but then it's essentially the same thing as saying, well, it's magic, then you're still lacking explanatory power. That's just the way it is.
Prejudices.
But if you said, God is the cause of life, as many theists do, we ask you how, or how did he do it, and there is actual no answer.
There is no incompatibility between being a theist and looking into the hows of creation. So, when I'm asked how did God do it, how did God create life, the answer is very simple. God created life via the laws of motion, the laws of nature, which he holds in being, and he used the normal chemical processes that research discloses to us. Then it evolved as outlined in the theory of evolution. There is nothing incompatible between being a theist and saying that God holds the laws of nature in operation, and holding the normal scientific explanations of how God does what he does.
So you're a theistic evolutionist. That's completely fine by me. But do not see a particular problem when you say, well, God holds these laws in effect, and then turn around and you say, well, I also believe in miracles. Okay, well, if you believe that God intervenes, how do we know that God actually does that? But you seem to sort of have your cake and eat it too, whether or not we know God because he doesn't intervene, i.e. keep the laws constant, and also, well, we also know when miracles occur. So it's a sort of like tails I win, heads you lose. The whole entire definition of omnipotence is scaled back to the work and mean pretty much anything.
Omnipotence means something very precise. It means simply God can do any logically possible act. No act is possible which involves or instantiates a contradiction. Therefore, counterexamples based on intrinsic contradiction simply do not apply to what is being asserted.
Okay, so I have to come again and explain the modified problem of the rock as it relates to the problem of omnipotence. Again, he refines the definition of to which that can really be applied to any being. No being can do anything to which is logically inconsistent. And he just says, well, God can do all things that are logically consistent. Okay, let's take the problem of the rock yet again, because it's not logically inconsistent. My favorite modification, let's turn it into bench pressing. Can I put on weights that put on so much weight on the bench press that I cannot lift? Yes, because that is logically possible. Can God? No, because the definition implied in the definition of Omnipotence is not possible. A theist cannot get around this particular problem. Therefore, the definition of omnipotence is vague. Simply saying that God can do all logically possible things does not give any indication of what he can actually do. What are we actually saying about it? So we're no longer describing laws. But what does it mean to be super over nature? What does it mean to be above nature?
I wrote, second, it is very clear what theists hold and how it places God above nature. Causes are prior to, above, if you will, effects. God, by continually willing the ongoing operation of the laws of nature, maintains the universe in being. See my video number 15. Human minds, by willing, perturb the laws determining the motions of our bodies. You may not believe them, but they're certainly not vague claims.
Okay, so God is just simply prior to natural laws.
I'm not sure what adverb Paladin put in front of prior, but it sounded dangerously like temporally. And of course, I did not say that God is temporally prior to natural laws. God's causality is concurrent.
Now, I quoted that whole section for a reason, to show that I'm not trying to strawman him. And here he directly contradicts himself. He wants to say, no, that the causes from God to the natural world are concurrent, when he himself quotes his own text to which he wrote to me saying that it was prior. And then he wants to make me seem dishonest because I added the adverb temporal. Prior is a temporal phenomenon. Even concurrent is a temporal phenomenon. When you are talking about causation, you're talking about temporal phenomenon. And now he can't even maintain his own argument for 20 seconds or whatever without even refuting or contradicting himself. And I'm the one that's so supposed to be ignorant or dishonest here? Please. Really, that doesn't really tell us anything or tell us how it works or tell us how we can actually know it. Again, epistemology challenge, right?
It's difficult to understand how being told that God exists and is the cause of the laws of nature doesn't tell the atheist paladin anything. And as to how, I've said how. God causes the laws of nature by an act of will. We all know that we are able to will new realities into being. If atheist paladin disbelieves that, let him attack that knowledge. And so I have answered his challenge by explaining both what we've learned and how it is that we come to know it. And I've also told him how it is that God maintains the laws in being. So I'm not sure what it is he's objecting to.
And of course, he mentions his video. And there you have it. Magic. Or actually, as he calls it, the will. How does the will work? It just does. Yep, that's an explanation. And everybody knows this, and it's, according to him, knowledge. And I'm the one that's arrogant. That God is continually ongoing the operations of laws of nature. In other words, he posits as God is the reason why the laws of the universe are conserved or act in the way they do. No, I don't agree. The whole argument of the videos to me is the God of the gaps.
Atheists have a standard playbook that they appeal to whether or not it fits the situation at hand. The appeal to the God of the gaps, quote unquote, is a standard play. Of course, my argument is not a God of the gaps argument. A God of the gaps is a hypothesis which is made to fill a gap in scientific knowledge when there is no adequate scientific theory.
One, you propose that there is a gap in the explanation of the conservation of laws, which isn't a real gap because scientists don't seem to ever fret over this problem. And then you propose God as a means to fill that, or to be that explanation. So you're saying it's not God of the gaps. Okay, have at it, Haas. I don't really care. I digress.
I'm not making a hypothesis. I'm making a deduction. If he objects to the deduction, there are standard ways taught in Logic 101 to deal with deductions that you disagree with. There are two kinds of objections you can make to a deduction. Either 1, you can attack the premises as false, or 2, you can attack the logical moves as invalid. Atheist Paladin has done neither. He's merely pulled a play out of the atheist playbook, not realizing that this situation calls for a completely different approach.
And this is why I completely say he's being dishonest. We've been over this before. I've actually done that. The fact that you talk about reification later on is the fact that it proves that I have attempted so. You do not get to make it seem that I have not attempted it. That you cannot do. That is not your prerogative, and that's why you're dishonest. It's fine that you don't agree with my conclusions or the fallacies I rail against you, but you don't get to sit there and say, well, I'm being irrational. You disagree. You disagree with my invalidation of your premises and the invalidation of your logical form. If you don't agree, that's fine, but you don't get to say that I haven't attempted to do so.
Then it is logically or metaphysically possible. And there is no contradiction involved in thinking that the laws of nature might change at some point in time.
Okay, I do realize that I made a misstep in making the laws of physics sort of like absolute laws of logic. And I do admit my problem here. But again, this is the good old problem of induction. And this is what we're discussing here. And the fact of the matter is, I do not have to justify the problem of induction. It's only a problem if you take deductive conclusions and accept them absolutely, rather than tentatively, as you should. I accept all inductive propositions as tentative. If the sun does not rise tomorrow, okay. But do not expect me to have to justify to you that I don't have that expectation, because there's nothing within my experiences that disqualify that expectation. I just don't expect it. And that's all there is. It's tentative. It's just the way it works.
Third, saying everything we know to exist is made of matter and energy is a factual error.
Okay, I'm cutting a lot out here for brevity. But again, it would be begging the question if I accept what you put forth as a proof of the supernatural and then turn around and pretty much already accept it as also as a means of objecting here. Either you've proved it or you've not. But you don't got to say, well, I've already proved it and now let's discuss it. That's pretty much what you're doing here, and that's just begging the question.
The Atheist Paladin and I had quite a bit of back and forth in the comments about his concept of reification. Let's think about it. A description which describes nothing real is simply a fiction. So his idea that the laws of nature are simply descriptions which describe nothing in reality makes physics a work of fiction. Of course, that is absurd.
Of course that is absurd, but that's not what I propose. And since you've already demonstrated that you are aware of the comments that we had, and that I do specifically address that in the comments, you know for a fact that you are strawmanning my position and intentionally being dishonest. You are not arguing in good faith. Now that it took me about 20 minutes to calm down, let me clarify where lies the problem of reification. And this will pretty much put his argument to an end. Okay, we had a very long back and forth, and he says that one of the examples that he gives that the laws of nature cause is evolution. I went in to explain how evolution can come about without actually talking about transcendental causes like his laws of nature. I talked about how inheritance, modification, and selection all produce the phenomenon that we see that we call evolution, and how it arises naturally out of the properties of the things in themselves. Because of this, then there is no need to talk about the laws of nature, quote unquote, as a causal explanation of evolution. But he does not agree, of course. He did not agree with this, of course, because then that would make his argument completely refuted.
There is one law of gravity which operates everywhere. That was what allowed Newton to explain the orbits of the Earth after experiencing the falling apple. The atheist paladin would have us step backward in time.
Oh Lord, he presumes to know what I've been saying, when he has demonstrated that he is not actually willing to discuss what I actually say. I do not deny the universality of the laws. That's a very beautiful thing that the laws are universal. But this, again, is done through inductive observation. Everywhere we observe the laws of the universe, that the laws of gravitation seem to remain constant. And that it happens throughout the universe. Okay. But that does not refute anything that I have said, nor do I disagree with the universality of the laws. So your point is mute.
There's one more glaring inconsistency in the atheist paladin's position, and that is that he considers the laws of nature to be descriptions only. And, as descriptions, we know historically that they have changed. The laws described by Newton are not those described by Einstein or Schrödinger, so he cannot consistently hold that the laws are only descriptions, and that they do not change. That is a position which is contradicted by history.
The laws of physics. You seem to be confusing my laws of physics with your laws of nature. The laws of physics. And furthermore, of course, those descriptions change as more data comes in. We are trying to model reality as accurate as we can. And again, the whole problem of induction. Again, I accept everything tentatively, so it's not an issue for me. If you want to say that the quote-unquote laws of nature can change, whatever the hell that means, fine, go ahead and believe that. But again, I accept everything tentatively anyways. So it's not really a problem. To the supernatural in the way that defies understanding. But they defy the laws of physics. They defy the things that we so far can know about.
Notice how the atheist paladin is begging the question here. He's saying that the objects of physics are the only objects that we can know about. He ignores the fact that philosophy allows us to deduce the existence of an immaterial God, and he ignores the fact that many people have had direct experiences of God, as I outlined in my video 45. Begging the question doesn't really advance the argument. It merely tells us what the atheist paladin's faith position is. And as we are going to see, his faith position involves a number of contradictions.
Wow, just wow. Okay, so he obviously his PhD is not in philosophy, because otherwise he would know that philosophy is largely in disagreement whether the existence of God is proven. If he wants to go ahead and make that statement, that only shows how just ignorant he is of philosophical history. So therefore he can't use that as a counterpoint of showing that we can know the existence of non-material things. As I point out, so far the only thing that we can know and we can agree on is the material. I'm not saying that that's the only thing that exists, as I said before in my previous video, but it's the one thing we can agree on. If he wants to say we know about material things, well, then he has to do a better argument than, well, philosophy says so, because it doesn't. But if he wants to go into the argument from personal experience, I'm not going to go in that to here. Plenty of atheists have also debunked that style of argument. So I'm not going to touch that here. But again, that's not evidence of in the material. Just to put a long story short, if someone wants to suggest something in a video that actually deals this quite succinctly, go ahead and put that in the comments section, and I'll put that in the description box.
If
God was to heal an amputee, that would violate the conservation of energy.
This is typical of the kind of inconsistencies I encounter in dealing with atheists. When I offer the laws of nature as realities causing events to happen and forbidding other events from happening, I am told that I am reifying descriptions, that there are no laws operating in nature. But when atheists want to attack the idea of miracles, then suddenly the laws of nature become empowered to forbid certain kinds of events while predicting others. You can't have it both ways, to Atheist Paladin.
Of course, Dennis would have a point if that was actually saying, but I was given an example of how the supernatural is actually different from the natural. That I was saying, and it's perfectly clear in the context of this discussion. If you want to say that the supernatural is the same as the natural, I can point to the certain miracles that actually do not conform to the laws of nature. So therefore, I'm actually demonstrating that the natural and the supernatural are not the same thing. So it does operate in the way that we don't understand via the natural processes.
It is sad that he does not already know this, but the limits of human understanding are not the limits of reality.
It is actually sad that you continue to demonstrate that you are not actually addressing what I actually say. Now that's sad. Whether as you're defining spiritual as intentional, really that's just your philosophy. That's definitely not present in some Christian understandings or any other understandings. Really, this guy makes lots of videos about that.
As with other things, the Atheist Paladin is factually in error. I don't make lots of videos about Christian understandings. In fact,
I'll actually be nice for once and actually assume that you're not actually trying to straw man me, despite the fact that we already have a previous history that you do. I'm not saying that you make lots of videos about Christian understanding, but rather about intentionality.
In fact, I've made no videos about Christian understandings. I've made a series of videos about philosophy, and my conclusions are supportive of many faiths. Secondly, he is certainly wrong that intentionality is not at the core of spirituality. Aristotle called God self-thinking thought. I could go through many faiths. The three primary virtues in Christianity are faith, hope, and charity. Each of these is an intentional virtue. St. Augustine explains the imago Dei, the image of God in which we are created according to Genesis 1, as involving our being, our intellect, and our will. Buddhism teaches people to let go of their desires. Again, spirituality is intentionality. The core message of Islam is surrender to the will of God. Again, an intentional state.
Do I really have to describe what the issue is here? Okay, this is not really a relevant point to argue over. I can give it to him that, since it's not really integral. But hey, so I intend to fix my car. Am I being spiritual? I intend to go on a bike ride. Am I being spiritual? I intend to kill someone. Am I being spiritual? I intend to look to the stars through a telescope. Am I being spiritual? Well, maybe in Carl Sagan's case. But again, I guess we can see the problem of the examples that he's giving. Very, very vague. I mean, if you wanted to talk to me about dictionary definitions so much in the comments section, and yet this is not the dictionary definition of spirituality, and that the fact that you're using your fallacious reasoning to support this is really silly. But again, this is not really integral to anything, so you can have the point if you wish it. And then you say that the acts imply intentional agents. Again, how do we know this?
The Atheist Paladin's feigned ignorance is almost beyond belief. How do we know that intentional acts come from intentional agents? Well, because they're intentional acts. The characteristic of a mind is that it is able to think and to will. So, intentional acts, such as thinking and willing, come from minds, by definition.
Talked about feign ignorance. You're really feigning ignorance about the context of this discussion. I'm talking about how you know about supernatural beings. If you want to say through intentionality, you're still not really answering the question. You're still not providing how, if someone can say, well, I know this was done by an angel. How would you go proving or disproving that? The mere person believing that this was intentional does not make an argument.
I wrote, fifth, God of Gaps arguments are hypothetical. The classical proofs are not hypothetical, but deductive. Thus, the objection is inapplicable.
Whether you admitted it or not, God out of gaps thinking is quite a problem for most supernatural beliefs and proposals. Whether or not your particular proof is a God of the gaps is actually completely separate from this, and you end up sort of mixing the two here. Just to clarify. No, it isn't. As you make in your video, when you argue for the conservation of laws, you say that God is by definition that. Well, God in your argument is undefined.
I have 3 points to make in response to this. First, the Atheist Paladin has not lodged a single objection to my proof. All he is objecting to is what label we should assign to what I have in fact proved to exist. The fact that there is an end of the line of explanation, that it is immaterial, that it is a metal law, and so on, have gone undisputed. My second point is a question. What does the Atheist Paladin want to call what I've proved? Here's the clip from the video in which I suggested that the appropriate name was God. Something which keeps the laws of nature in operation and also conserves itself in being fits the description of what we call God. My third point is that what I've proven to exist meets the dictionary definition of God. The dictionary defines God as the supreme being, the ruler and creator of the universe. Certainly a being which is the end of the line of explanation, which explains everything below it, which is essentially all of material reality and the laws by which material reality operates, is certainly supreme. Many physicists, such as Stephen Hawking and Victor Stenger, have argued that the laws of nature are adequate to create the universe out of nothing. So whatever holds the laws in existence is essentially the creator. And of course, the ruler of the universe is the one who creates and maintains its laws, and this is exactly what I have proven to exist.
Okay, let's just assume, let's ignore all my previous objections to your argument and just say that God actually meets the quote-unquote definition of what fits in your argument. Even if we go that far, I think that would still be invalid. Because even if there are a conservation of laws, all you've proven is that we just need an explanation for that. Whether a God or not fits your definition really is still not deductively proven. Let me give an example. Let's say, let's go with a actual still current mystery in science. We still don't know what exactly causes the radioactive decay of particles. But let's just say they're quantum multidimensional gremlins. And the quantum multidimensional gremlins fit the cause of the decay of particles by definition. If you can see what's wrong with my argument here, then you have actually refuted your argument.
I responded to this with 3 points. Sixth, regarding false claims, Aquinas is clear that Anselm's ontological argument is unsound and false. Paley's argument from design is hypothetical and inconclusive. Deductions such as those of Aristotle, the Buddhist logicians, Ibn Sina, Aquinas, and that in my video 15 are sound and give true conclusions. So the answer is, we know by applying the rules of logic.
Herein lies the rub. All those arguments are also arguments for God via pure reason. And not a lot of theists actually agree that you can prove God exists via that method. Some think you actually have to do more. But even so, are you actually suggesting that there are things that we know of because not pure reason, but also by empirical data? Would you say that God is actually provable by this method? That would actually be interesting conclusion. I'll refute that.
To say that the laws of physics are fictions and that there is no basis in reality for Newton's insight of universal laws applying throughout the universe is a rejection of physics. To say that something which maintains the entire universe in existence doesn't qualify as God is at best a personal opinion, and certainly when we look at the dictionary, which is the criterion of educated usage of words in the English language, we see that what I proved in fact meets the definition of God. So your claim to have refuted it is essentially vacuous.
Well, since I've already demonstrated, if anybody's been paying attention to this video, that half the things that you accuse me of saying I didn't actually say, and that the fact that I already went into more detail of why your argument is refuted, you can claim I'm vacuous all you want. Everybody will see you for the ostrich that you are.
Further, you've not even addressed the arguments of Aristotle, the Buddhist logicians, Ibn Sina, and Aquinas.
Oh, I see. So you're actually using the blunderbuss method here to actually just name off a bunch of names, and so when I refute your argument, you can always fall back to these arguments. Well, you didn't really address these. That doesn't count for argumentation. I'm sorry, but this is a dishonest tactic at the very least. If you're going to turn off and name names and expect me to also turn around and refute those arguments, then now you have to refute all the works of Socrates and Philo just because I mentioned them.
Seventh, unfalsifiable claims are made by naturalists whenever they propose a multiverse to avoid the fine-tuning argument. So that sword cuts both ways.
It's first, the logical fallacy of tu quoque. So just because naturalist does it doesn't excuse you from it. They're wrong in doing so.
Of course, I haven't made any unfalsifiable hypotheses because I haven't posited any hypothetical arguments. So it doesn't apply to me.
Even if your specific argument that you propose that we're discussing here doesn't make an unfalsifiable claim, still doesn't mean that you're not doing the U2 fallacy. All you have to do is say, I am discussing about not making unfalsifiable claims. If you're going to turn around and come to me and say, well, the naturalists do it too, then you have committed the U2 fallacy. There are no ways about it. You have just done the textbook definition of it, so your point is mute. A multiverse.
The atheist paladin is once again showing that he doesn't know what he's talking about. First of all, he doesn't understand the hypothetico-deductive method. That is the scientific method. The scientific method involves making hypotheses, working out their consequences, and then testing to see whether those consequences are in fact real. Of course, we can't test for multiverses because, by definition, this universe contains everything which is physically accessible to us. So anything in other universes is physically inaccessible, and therefore nothing about them can be falsified. Secondly, regardless of what theory one has, the theory itself is hypothetical. To say that there's no mathematical possibility of having supersymmetry and not having a multiverse is ridiculous, because we don't even know what the fundamental laws of quantum gravity are. We don't have the equations, and we don't have the model. So having neither equations nor a model, we have no idea whether or not supersymmetry is compatible with a single universe or only compatible with a multiverse theory.
Ah, so here's where you really shine here. You are a physicist who's talking against the queen of sciences, that being math, and also going against the consensus, the scientific consensus, while your intellectually dishonesty really shines here. Again, if scientists were to prove supersymmetry, it may not be a direct way to prove multiverse, but it would be reasonable to assume that multiverse would be a good explanation. That's all I was saying. If you want to say, well, despite this, we may still have good reason to believe that it's a single universe, despite there is no math to prove it, or no scientists to say otherwise, then go ahead, let your light of intellectual dishonesty shine.
Eighth, we can know what God wants of us from the potentials in our individual natures. Why would He will a potency He never wanted actualized? We have free will, so no single course is dictated. We can choose one potential over another as long as we respect other people.
Okay. So basically we know God's will is that we do whatever we want.
Apparently the atheist paladin has difficulty in reading standard English and comprehending its meaning. I did not say that God's will is that we can do whatever we feel like or whatever we want. What I said is that God holds open potentials for us, and that we can infer from that God wills us to fulfill our human potential, that God's will for us is to become fully realized human beings. And since He holds these potentials open to others, to do so in a way which does not interfere with others becoming fully realized human beings.
Wow, you can really be a condescending schmuck sometimes, can't you? So basically, you're still saying the exact same thing that you say, no, I'm not saying. Free will is doing whatever you want. I'm not going to get into discussion of if we have actual free will. You're free to go about that. But again, if you're going to say we have free will, then whatever we choose is a choice by definition. In free will is what we want. If we're not coerced or we're not determined in any sort of way, then by definition every choice that we make is a choice that we want. Therefore, I'm not mischaracterizing. It's the very definition of free will. Well, he doesn't say that he actually agrees with me. He just doesn't seem to understand why I make the uniqueness of a prediction a requirement of the challenge. So I'm just going to let this point drop. He really doesn't really understand why this is a particular requirement, and it really doesn't refute my argument at all anyways.
It's hardly anti-intellectual to realize the fallibility of the human condition. It's hardly anti-intellectual to realize that science makes mistakes, and that some of these mistakes last a long, long time, let's say 100 years or more.
What is intellectually honest is to imply that science actually suffers because of this bias. It does not. Eventually, yeah, sometimes it took over a long time for something to actually be accepted, such as the Platonic theory. Yeah, it took a long time. But to simply disregard science just because of that is anti-intellectual. Overall, my point that you actually responded to is still intact. Whether or not someone wants to turn around and say, well, you just don't want to believe in God, well, then that's still not an argument, regardless of the fact of what you said.
11th, miracles are for their recipients. Faith, by definition, is unprovable.
Well, we agree on something again. So what? That's the whole point, huh? Not making an argument for faith. You are. At least some theists are.
No, I'm not trying to prove faith. I've never tried to prove faith. I've never thought that faith was provable. What other theists may do is completely irrelevant to my response to your challenge. Thank you very much for watching.
It's not relevant? Really? So we're talking about... Okay, so I make a video laying down the ground rules about how they should respond to my challenge, and then you respond to one of those points, and now all of a sudden to what I say about that is now all of a sudden invalid. Whatever, dude. Again, faith is not a good argument. If you're not arguing for that, then you can actually agree with that point and we can move on. Okay, let's wrap this up and do a summary. Did he give a definition of the supernatural that wasn't a negative? No, because he still supports the existence of non-material things. I do not know what you mean by non-material. Therefore, you do not mean this part of the epistemology challenge. Did he give us a way to distinguish between a supernatural and the natural? No, but I can give it a pass on that since he wants to propose that they're part of the same integrated whole. So I can give him a pass. Did he provide a means to distinguish between positive, correct supernatural claims and incorrect supernatural claims? No, that he did not. He only suggested pure reason, but I have actually already shown that is an incomplete answer at best. And on the final point, he seems to misunderstand why I have some of the rules I do. It seems like we don't have a disagreement on it. It just doesn't seem to understand why I have it. But beyond that, I just couldn't take the level of consistent dishonesty to which he shows, and I think anybody who had a brain on them would not talk to TheAtheistPaladin because he cannot be honest.